My own sister framed me for a crime I didn't commit. She planted drugs in my room and called the police. My parents backed her up. I thought my life was over until I found out why she did it. And that's when I stopped crying and started planning the kind of revenge that would make sure she'd never forget who she messed with. My name is Rachel Carter, and up until 2 months ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I thought it meant loyalty. I thought it meant love. I thought it meant that when life tried to crush you, the people you shared blood with would be the ones pulling you up, not pushing you down. I was wrong. Because the day my sister Kayla planted drugs in my bedroom, called the police on me, and smiled while they handcuffed me in my own living room, was the day I realized that sometimes family is the sharpest knife in your back. And the worst part? My parents backed her up. It was a Wednesday, ordinary, forgettable, nothing special. I had just come back from my shift at a local coffee shop. My hair smelled like espresso and steamed milk. My shoes stuck faintly to the floor from spilled syrup. And all I wanted to do was shower, change into sweats, and collapse on my bed. I didn't even notice Kayla's car parked down the block when I walked in. That was my first mistake. Kayla was older than me by 3 years, blonde, flawless, and the kind of girl who could get away with anything because she had a smile that made people forget their own names. We weren't close growing up, but lately things had gotten worse. Snide comments at family dinners, accidental spills on my clothes. The time she stole my favorite leather jacket and told everyone I'd given it to her. Petty, sure, but I never thought she'd cross a line like this. When I walked into my room that day, everything looked normal. My window was open, letting in a faint breeze, but I didn't think much of it. I tossed my backpack onto my desk, plugged in my phone, and headed for the shower. I was halfway through washing my hair when I heard the banging. Not a knock, not even pounding. This was kicking. My heart dropped. I wrapped a towel around myself, sprinted to my room, and froze. 2 police officers were inside my bedroom. My parents stood in the hallway, pale and silent. And right there, sitting neatly on top of my folded laundry, was a small plastic bag filled with something white. I blinked. What is that? The taller officer's voice was clipped. Miss Carter, we received a report of controlled substances in your possession. Is this yours? I laughed. Actually laughed, that panicked, confused laugh you give when the world stops making sense. Of course not. I don't even. And that's when I saw her, Kayla, leaning against the door frame, arms crossed, smiling like this was the best day of her life. Check her desk drawer, she said sweetly. My stomach lurched. Kayla, what are you? The officer opened the top drawer, and there it was, another bag, identical to the first. I've never seen those before. I was shaking now, gripping the towel tighter like it could hold me together. I don't even. Rachel, my mom's voice cut in, trembling, please, just tell them the truth. The truth? My father stepped forward. We've been worried about you for a while, honey. The late nights, the money you can't explain. What money? My voice was a scream now. I work at a coffee shop. I don't. The shorter officer was already reading me my rights. And all the while, Kayla watched with that smug, perfect little smile. Here's the thing about getting arrested in your own home. It's not loud or chaotic like on TV. It's quiet, methodical, humiliating. The cold metal of the cuffs bit into my wrists. My wet hair dripped down my back. My bare feet left little prints on the hardwood as they led me outside. And my neighbors saw everything. They put me in the back of the squad car, and that's when I caught Kayla's eye one last time before the door shut. She mouthed 3 words. So quietly, so casually. I warned you. What did she mean? Warned me about what? I didn't have time to figure it out, because 5 minutes later, I was being booked at the precinct like some criminal off the street. Mugshot, fingerprints, the works. I kept saying the same thing over and over. It's not mine. It's not mine. But no one looked at me like they believed it. It wasn't until I was sitting alone in that holding cell, the echo of the bars slamming shut still in my ears, that it hit me. This wasn't random. This wasn't some horrible mistake. Kayla wanted me gone. And she was willing to ruin my life to make it happen. But why? What had I done to her that was worth this? I didn't know yet. All I knew was that if I didn't figure it out fast, I was going to lose everything, my job, my apartment, my freedom, and maybe my life. I thought my heart was going to punch its way out of my chest. The pounding on the door was so violent, I swore the hinges rattled. My mom rushed over and opened it, not to a neighbor, not to a delivery driver, but to 2 police officers, 1 male, 1 female, both wearing expressions that could slice through steel. "Are you Aaron Carter?" the female officer asked, eyes locked on me. "Why, yes," I stammered. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. Step forward, please." The words didn't compute. Possession? My brain couldn't catch up. I turned to my mom, my dad, my sister, but they all just stood there. My mom's lips were pressed so tight they almost disappeared. My dad's arms were folded, as if this was something he'd been expecting. And Maddie? She stood behind them, clutching her phone, her lips twitching with that smug, satisfied little smile. "This has to be a mistake," I said, stepping back instinctively. "I don't have anything." The male officer moved in, his voice firm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us now." Before I knew it, my hands were wrenched behind me, cold steel biting into my wrists. I looked at my parents again, waiting for them to say something, to stand up for me, to demand answers. But they just watched, like spectators at a show they'd bought tickets to. As they read me my rights, Maddie piped up sweetly. She's been acting weird lately, staying in her room a lot. I told Mom something was going on. That was it. That was the knife twist. She wanted me gone, and now she was handing them the blade. The ride. The patrol car's back seat felt like the coldest place on earth. I stared at the metal mesh, fighting tears that burned my eyes. I kept replaying the moment, Maddie's smug face, the way my parents didn't defend me. The officers were silent, professional, but I could feel the judgment radiating from them. To them, I was just another screw-up. At the station, they took my mugshot, my fingerprints. Every flash of the camera made me feel like I was being branded. I kept saying, "You don't understand, I've never touched drugs in my life." But it was like talking to a wall. The evidence. It wasn't until they showed me a clear plastic bag with white powder in it that my knees almost gave out. "That was found in the top drawer of your nightstand," the female officer said. "Anything you want to tell us?" I shook my head, my throat dry. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before. Someone put it there." The officer arched an eyebrow. "And who would do that?" I swallowed hard. My instincts screamed at me to say Maddie's name, but then I thought of my parents. If they didn't believe me when I said I was innocent, what would they do if I accused their golden child? Betrayal at the station. After hours of questioning, they called my parents. When they arrived, my mom sighed heavily, like this whole thing was an inconvenience for her. "I told you this would happen if you didn't straighten up," she muttered under her breath. My dad said nothing, just shook his head. I wanted to scream. Straighten up? I've never even smoked a cigarette. But they looked at me like I was exactly what Maddie painted me to be, a liar, a disappointment, a criminal. They posted bail, but only after Maddie made a big show of saying, "I just hope you get the help you need, Aaron." The ride home was silent, but the air was thick with judgment. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about clearing my name. This was about exposing Maddie for what she really was. Because if I didn't, she'd win. And I wasn't going to let that happen. The next morning, I woke up with that heavy, pit-in-your-stomach feeling, the one you get when you've had a nightmare, but then realize it's not a nightmare. It's real. I didn't even have to open my bedroom door to know they were all out there, my parents, my sister, and probably a plan to handle me like I was some criminal under their roof. I could hear them whispering in the kitchen. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough. This is the only way. She needs to be taught a lesson. The police will believe us. The police. They were actually going to do it. I sat on the edge of my bed, my mind spinning. I had two choices, wait here and let them frame me completely, or fight back before they had the chance. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated but picked up. "Hey, it's Jamie," the voice said quietly. "Your neighbor." I saw something last night. Jamie had always been that quiet guy across the street, kept to himself, but friendly enough to nod when we passed. "What did you see?" I asked, my voice low. I saw your sister and a guy, tall, black hoodie, come into your room through the back window. They had a little bag, then they left. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to get involved. Then I heard your parents talking this morning. My hands tightened around the phone. They're going to call the cops today, Jamie said, but you need to know I have a camera. It points right at your backyard. It caught everything. It was like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. I told Jamie I'd be there in 5 minutes. I slipped on my hoodie and grabbed my backpack. The hallway was clear. They were still in the kitchen. I moved fast, heart pounding. When I reached Jamie's house, he already had the footage pulled up on his laptop. And there it was, crystal clear. My sister, grinning like a devil, holding a small Ziploc bag. The guy with her passed it to her, and she tucked it behind my bookshelf. Then they slipped out the window like it was nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen, memorizing every frame. Jamie handed me a USB drive. It's all on here, date stamped. If they try anything, you have proof. I thanked him, shoving the drive deep into my bag. For the first time in days, I felt something other than fear. I felt dangerous. When I got back home, they were all waiting in the living room. My sister looked smug, leaning back on the couch like she'd already won. We've decided to have a family talk, my mom said, her tone dripping with fake concern. Dad folded his arms. We know you've been making some bad choices, hanging around the wrong people. We can't have that under our roof. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop from laughing. They were so sure they had me trapped. My sister tilted her head, feigning pity. Look, I know you're stressed lately, but if you're into certain substances, we just want you to get help before the cops find out. Oh, I said, keeping my voice steady. Funny you mentioned the cops, because I was actually thinking about calling them myself. The room went still. My mom's eyes darted to my sister. Why would you do that? She asked. I pulled the USB from my bag and held it up, because I said they're going to want to see this. Footage of you, dear sister, breaking into my room and planting drugs behind my bookshelf. It's pretty clear. High resolution. Great angle. My sister's face drained of color. Dad's brows furrowed, and Mom tried to speak, but I cut her off. Oh, and just so you know, the neighbor's camera caught you and your little friend in the act. And he's willing to testify. So, maybe you should think very carefully about your next move. I let the silence hang there, heavy and suffocating. My sister tried to recover. That's fake. You probably edited it. Really? I said, leaning forward. Because the police have very advanced ways to verify footage. And I'm sure they'd love to find out who your supplier is. Dad stood up, his voice hard. Enough. We're not having the cops involved in family matters. Oh, but you were fine involving them when you thought I was the target? I shot back. That shut him up. I walked to my room, plugged the USB into my laptop, and started uploading the footage to a secure cloud. Then I sent a copy to a friend, just in case. It wasn't just about defending myself anymore. This was war. And I had the upper hand. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know yet, was that I wasn't going to just clear my name. I was going to burn their entire little scheme to the ground. I thought the worst had already happened. I thought the sight of 2 officers rifling through my underwear drawer while my sister leaned in the hallway with a smug little smirk was rock bottom. But I was wrong. The real breaking point came a week later when the whispers at school turned into open stares, when I walked into the cafeteria and watched an entire table fall silent, eyes darting between me and the door. I'd been suspended until the police finished their investigation, but news travels fast. And in high school, a rumor isn't just a rumor, it's a sentence. Emily didn't slow down either. If anything, she doubled down. She posted cryptic things online. Not outright lies, but twisted enough to paint me as some sort of addict spiraling out of control. One post read, "Some people hide who they really are. Glad the truth is finally coming out." Underneath, her friends left little emojis, broken hearts, crying faces, even one syringe. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to scream at everyone that it wasn't true, that the bag of white powder the cops had found was something I'd never seen before in my life. But my parents, they weren't on my side. At dinner, My mom would glance at me like I was a ticking bomb, one wrong move away from exploding. My dad, usually quiet, became even more distant. His phone seemed more interesting than anything I had to say. They spoke to me like I was already guilty. "Maybe this is a wake-up call," my mom said one night, not looking at me. "A wake-up call for what?" I asked, heat rising in my chest. She didn't answer. It was like living in a house where everyone had decided you were dangerous, but no one would say it out loud. I started locking my door at night, not because I was afraid of them physically hurting me, but because I was terrified of what else Emily might plan in my room if she got the chance. But the thing about paranoia, it eats you alive from the inside. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like her sneaking into my room. Every time my mom knocked, I jumped like she was the police. Then, 2 nights before the school board meeting that would decide whether I could return to class, I caught her. It was 2:14 a.m. I woke up to a faint click, the sound of my door unlocking. I'd started putting a chair under the knob before bed, just in case. But that night, I forgot. When the door eased open, light from the hallway spilled across my floor. Emily's silhouette stood there, still as stone, something small clutched in her hand. "Emily?" I croaked, my voice hoarse from sleep. She froze just for a second, then bolted. I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Hey," I shouted, chasing her down the hall. But by the time I reached the kitchen, she was gone. The back door was swinging shut. On the floor, by the fridge, was a tiny plastic bag. Not full, just enough. Enough to ruin me again. I picked it up with trembling hands and shoved it in my pocket. And that was the moment something inside me snapped. If she wanted war, I was going to give her one. But I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to do what she'd never expect. I was going to turn the game on her. The courtroom was colder than I'd imagined, not in temperature, but in the way every pair of eyes seemed to pierce through me. My heart pounded as I took my seat at the defense table beside my attorney, Linda. Across the room, Natalie sat with a smug smirk, her arm draped casually around the back of her chair, as if this was all just another family squabble. My parents were behind her, whispering and glaring at me like I'd brought this on myself. The prosecution started their case, confident and smooth. They painted me as a reckless drug user spiraling out of control, someone who needed intervention before she hurt herself or others. Natalie sat there, nodding in agreement, dabbing fake tears with a tissue she didn't need. But then, Linda stood up. She didn't start by defending me. She started by dismantling Natalie. "Your Honor, we have video footage from my client's home. It shows the exact moment these drugs were placed in her room and by whom." The prosecutor's confident grin faltered. Natalie's head whipped toward her attorney, panic flashing in her eyes. The video played on the big screen. Grainy, but clear enough, it showed Natalie slipping into my room when she thought no one was home. She pulled a small baggie from her purse, stuffed it under my pillow, and smoothed the bedspread like nothing had happened. The timestamp matched perfectly with when she later discovered the drugs and called the police. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. My parents' faces went pale. Natalie's attorney leaned over to whisper furiously in her ear, but she was frozen. Then Linda dropped the final bomb. "We also have text messages, Your Honor." Messages between the defendant's sister and a friend, bragging about how she was going to teach her sister a lesson and make her life hell. The judge called for order, but you could feel the air shift. The power dynamic flipped in an instant. I wasn't the villain anymore. Natalie was. Natalie stammered something about it being a joke, but the judge wasn't buying it. Neither was anyone else. The case against me was dismissed on the spot. Natalie was arrested for filing a false police report, perjury, and evidence tampering. As they cuffed her, she looked right at me, but this time, there was no smirk, just fear. My parents? They didn't say a word to me as I walked out. They were too busy chasing after Natalie, demanding explanations. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But my victory didn't end there. With the help of Linda, I filed a civil suit against Natalie for defamation and emotional distress. I won. The settlement wasn't just money, it was the truth, legally documented, that I had been innocent all along. Months later, I stood in my own apartment, unpacking boxes in peace. No police sirens, no slammed doors, no whispers behind my back. Just quiet. Natalie ended up with a criminal record and a reputation so tarnished she couldn't get a job in the same town. My parents eventually reached out, wanting to talk. I didn't answer, because I finally understood something. Sometimes family isn't the people you're born into. It's the people who fight for you when no one else will. And I wasn't going to waste another second trying to win the approval of people who had stood by and watched me burn. I didn't just get my life back. I took it back. And no one, not Natalie, not my parents, not anyone, was ever going to take it from me again.